From the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this Tuesday edition of The Watchdog, hosted by Phumulo Masualle. On the show this evening,
the branches are feeling that there's a need for us to do something to rescue the African National Congress.
Though according to numbers the ANC released today, Dr Zweli Mkhize is trailing Mr Ramaphosa by quite a stretch. He's adamant he's going to pull it off. He and his running mate, aspiring Secretary General Phumulo Masualle, tell us how.
The race for the ANC leadership has been narrowed down to a two-horse race between two former allies. Dr Zweli Mkhize, who's crisscrossing the length and breadth of South Africa, campaigning to unseat ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, is lagging behind with branch nominations. Outspoken ANC NEC member Lindiwe Sisulu failed to make it to the ballot, and Dr Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who narrowly lost out to Ramaphosa in 2017.
For President Cyril Ramaphosa, the total tally of nominations are 2,037. 2,037. And for Dr. Zweli Mkhize, the total tally is 916. 916. And as I said, these are the two names nominated for position of president.
ANC Treasurer General Phumulo Masualle leads the pack for the party's deputy presidency. Former Youth League leader Ronald Lamula and Oscar Mabuyane also wanting David Mabuza's job. The incumbent deputy president, David Mabuza, is seemingly on his way out as he failed to meet the threshold for the ballot as president.
For Comrade Paul Mashatile, the tally is 1,791. 1,791. And for the next name, which is Ronald Lamula, the total tally is 427. And for Comrade Oscar Mabuyane, the total tally is 397. 397. Those are the three nominees for position of deputy president.
Rejected former ANC KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Secretary by his province, Mdumiseni Ntuli, looks set to be heading to Little House as Secretary General, but he is facing contestation from Phumulo Masualle and Fikile Mbalula.
Mdumiseni Ntuli, and the total tally is 1,225. 1,225. And for Phumulo Masualle, the total tally is 889. 889. And for Fikile Mbalula, the total tally is 749. 749.
Stanley Chupu Matabata, Gwede Mantashe and David Masondo are slugging it out for the national chairpersonship position. Nomvula Mokonyane and Fibe Potgieter Kubule for the Deputy Secretary, whilst the Treasurer General position is between Pechane Chauke, Pule Mabe and Mzwandile Masina. Samkele Masego, SABC News, Johannesburg.
With just over 3 weeks to go to the ANC's elective conference, consolidated branch nominations suggest the one challenger who has the most realistic chance of challenging incumbent Cyril Ramaphosa is still trailing far behind in numbers. Is it the end of the road for the former Treasurer General of the ANC, or does he have an ace up his sleeve? Now, also part of this conversation is the man who is supposed to be his running mate, so to speak, and that's NEC member and former Eastern Cape chairperson Phumulo Masualle. Good evening to both of you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening to you and to all the viewers.
Well, the two of you have been going around together, showing your rapport, saying, I suppose to the party faithful, we are in this together. What have they been telling you?
Well, basically, we have been nominated by branches and we have responded to the call. The branches are feeling that there's a need for us to do something to rescue the African National Congress from being a party that is deeply divided, riven with factionalism, and a party that has got good policies that have not been implemented. People have raised the concerns about the rising levels of poverty, unemployment, the food prices that have gone up, the fuel prices, the energy crisis with the load shedding and all of this. They believe that the ANC needs to be effective in addressing all of those issues. Now, we believe, therefore, that our call is to contribute in implementation of the policies that should address that problem. And on that basis, we have felt that, like in my case, what I would like to offer is implementation of decisions. I've had a track record of having been part of the leadership of the ANC and contributed to building unity in the ANC. And I think that such a skill will be needed to help to deal with the problems of divisions. But at the same time, I think that having had a record in government, I've had a record of ensuring implementation, and this is what I would like to offer.
Has the party faithful told you anything different from what they have told him?
Well, thank you very much for your greetings to you and your viewers at home. Pretty much the same. The sense within the organization is a longing for a change. The organization is in a serious decline in a number of fronts. There is a sense that there needs to be a change brought about in the leadership as to really give impetus to efforts at rescuing the organization. If you look at the electoral performance, it's been on the decline. We almost being relegated to a rural party. All those concerns really are now knocking at the door, given the fact that we have elections in 2024. So all these together call for a change within the organization.
What is responsible for that decline? Because as a man who will have to run, Luthuli House, the headquarters of the ANC, if you are indeed elected, that's going to be your responsibility. So your understanding of what causes or caused the decline is actually very important.
Yes, absolutely. I think the major issue which I can cite is a very subjective one, almost paralyzing division within the organization, wherein the leadership seems incapable of driving through a program that ensures uniting the party, but secondly, making it to be able to really lead the processes within the state to ensure an all-round delivery so that we impact in improving the lives of our people.
But I mean, you both serve in the National Executive Committee of the ANC, which is the highest decision-making body within conferences. Have you been raising this? I had an interview with Mondli Gungubele last week, who was saying that half the things we hear about as the media or that go out there in the to the public are things that many of you as his comrades actually don't raise within that National Executive Committee or the National Working Committee.
We have raised these issues. In my case, for example, I can tell you I've raised the issues that the ANC leadership should not be seen as being consumed with factions, fighting, and spending a whole day. One time we spent a whole night just discussing the exclusion of 5 branches because one faction wanted them to be part of the conference in Gauteng. The other side also was saying, but why do you interfere with that process? And I asked the question, if we were discussing the topical issues which were worrying the public, the issues of high unemployment, if we're dealing with the issues of high fuel cost, if we're dealing with the issues of load shedding, and discussing what are we doing and spend the whole sleepless night dealing with those issues, then our people would understand. And I'm saying...
And why has that not happened? Because that is the question South Africans are. you spending so much time talking about factions or having a go at each other, things that have really no bearing in the lives of South Africans who want the issue of unemployment addressed, who want the economy to grow. You seem to be spending a hell lot more time, dealing with factional issues of getting rid of people, instead of devoting that time to things that matter.
Actually, precisely the point. And I think as we talk here, you need to understand we're talking about the organization that we're part of. We're criticizing ourselves as the leadership of the organization that we're part of. We are saying that there are a number of policies that have been approved, which not only the ANC members, but even those who are non-ANC have said these are good policies. And we're asking the question, why are they not being implemented? And in the conference and in the NEC, I've raised the question, why would we get a chronology of explanations as to why things are not implemented when we're talking to the leadership that controls the laws, that controls the fiscus, that controls the public administration system, that controls everything. Now, we cannot have, and I said this, that you cannot have a doctor who keep telling the patient that you are very sick, and I'm shocked this is how bad this illness is, but they don't give the treatment. And our point is therefore that when we go to the conference, we will accept that the policies are correct, but we also need to say that the focus on implementation is weak, and therefore let's change the leadership to focus on implementation.
What have been the answers, though, to those questions?
The problem is this factionalism. If you got a problem of factionalism, you will have the most reasonable, points being raised, but because the dominant group begins to push those away, then they may not necessarily pass. And that's why we say one of my major concerns would be how do we get rid of factionalism in the party so that we have a united party that can say, if we say we want to fight corruption, you can't fight it if you're a faction. A faction protects its members. It does not deal with justice or discipline in the party. And this has been my experience. And I've lived in a situation where I have been part of leading the caucuses leading to the conferences. As soon as the conference is over, I convene the caucus and tell them, comrades, this is over. We're not going to ever meet again. The leadership of the party must take over leadership. The problem comes when the leaders are not in touch with the branches, with structures, and they therefore rely on a faction to defend them, and therefore they allow wrong things to happen. And I'm saying that we're sick and tired of that. We need to correct it.
Is that what is happening now? Because, Cyril Ramaphosa came on the ticket of renewal, came on the ticket of dealing with corruption, doing away with factionalism. Why has that not happened?
Actually, the renewal, the unity, the dealing with corruption is an ANC decision. The ANC as a party has decided that we want to fight corruption. We've told everyone that those members of the ANC who are implicated in issues of corruption must stand up and face those issues. They have to accept investigation. They have to accept that the law must take its course. And then
if indeed it's the decision of the ANC, how come he failed where you think you are going to succeed?
Well, there are a number of things that we can say have happened which were part of those decisions. Let's take, for example, the commission on the state capture, the so-called Zondo Commission. That was a decision of the ANC. It wasn't a decision of one person. It was a decision of the ANC in 2017, even at the time of President Zuma. We took a decision that those members who are implicated must go and answer, and those members must answer for themselves, and they must actually ensure that the ANC does not get brought into disrepute because of that. That was a decision of the ANC. It has happened. It has moved on. However, what we've been criticizing is how, looking at the conduct of the members inside the party, some of those who have got similar kind of, being implicated in some of the wrongdoing seem to be protected by the party. Then we've also seen instances where some people would be facing a criminal justice system, but you also hear behind the scenes that there's a lot of agitation that comes from political leaders who are putting pressure for that to happen, not necessarily because of the independence of the criminal justice system, but because they actually want to get rid of them as contestants. And in this case, for example, I can say that I've raised this to the members of the National Executive Committee. the kind of things and machinations that some of the members do needs to be stamped out. And if, for example, you can hear that I've been charged and arrested, the most likely thing would be that because some members in the leadership believe that I'm on the way of the contestation, and that would be the issue. But we are saying the justice and criminal justice system must be allowed to act independently of the pressure of political parties. So if you've got a faction, it is easy to do those things, and we're saying let's get rid of the factions and allow the ANC to ensure that justice is followed, that people are treated impartially, that everyone must face the law when there's the need for it.
Do you believe that, or share the view that your party actually protects wrongdoers?
It's not the party, it's individuals in the party. And that's the difference, because the party is, it doesn't, the party as the ANC does not agree with, abuse of the system, abuse of power, doesn't agree with protecting people who are corrupt. It's individuals, because of their powerful position, they can do that. But the party needs to clear that up. And we are part of that party, and we're saying the conference, our branches are saying let's go and change so that we can restore this, and it's all about changing the leadership inside the party. The policies are fine, and the respect for the law, everybody respects the law. Everyone in the ANC wants to fight against corruption, but if people are implicated, they must face up there to the law. And we're saying that it's the factionalism that's causing the problem. There are lots of things that we should be dealing with on behalf of the community, which we are not, simply because the focus is taken away by dealing with issues that are not really having an impact on the community.
Well, the other side of this coin, Mr. Masualle, is that it's people saying, well, the faction that is effectively in charge is actually using state organs to preserve their dominance, even to harass and suppress those who are challenging it. Do you subscribe to that view?
There is belief that that could be at play, rightly or wrongly. Can I put it to you that I have, just as an example, flowing from a criticism, an observation one has made, proceeded to suggest that we do need to consider a change of leadership. The question that I've been asked was, are you scared of losing your job? I had to be explaining, these two are not related. So there is that psychological, call it intimidation, that is subtle, that if you express yourself, you're likely to be out of favor. Perhaps it depends from one individual to the other, but it's something that is there generally.
But have you seen it happen? Can you point to instances, for example, where people have had to lose their jobs because they dared to speak out?
I wouldn't say so. That's why I say some of this is very subtle. Some of it could just be self-regulation, that you decide I'm not going there because should I? This is what may visit me. Elsewhere, because again, maybe just to talk to this thing of factionalism, you do find that you go to have a conference, you elect a leadership, soon thereafter, those who ostensibly were for a particular view, they lose at conference, you see changes happening left, right, and center. That imposes some kind of intimidation and makes an impression to be that if you're not with the dominant group, you're likely not to be out of favor. If I may just take you back to the issue that you have raised to do with why these decisions seem not to be able to be implemented. I may just make this example by saying that sometimes you do articulate what is the position, what is correct. And often between the articulation and the actions, there tends to be a divide, a gulf. This is what needs to be corrected, because largely we have, and again it's a criticism that we share between ourselves, even at the NEC, that much as the importance of renewal has been placed on the agenda by the National Conference, very little by way of actions of the leadership to pursue that in earnest, such that it reflects. The tendency is for people to keep associations with those who support them, and that perhaps if those who support you happen even to be in breach of many of the organizational issues, that tends to be kids' gloves in terms of dealing with those. Perhaps if it's those who don't support you, you act very firmly and decisively on those. I think these are things that there would be held views about them within the organization in terms of the practice that we've seen, but these are things that we think going forward must be corrected. Lastly, I think we need to bring back the esteem of the branches of the ANC in terms of being custodians of overall the direction the organization takes. Where there is an overbearing influence or a position of strength by the leaders over the branches, you tend to have these proliferating without stopping.
But I'm keen to know whether you think these are mere perceptions or these things are real. Now they're happening.
Wait, okay.
Wait, let me come in there. A lot of this starts as perceptions because you first hear the rumors in the corridors within the party structures that so-and-so is going to be dealt with, so-and-so is going to be targeted, and so on. Then later, you actually see it in practice. Now, there are things that are sometimes very difficult to explain. In the cases, for example, let me just give you, in the example of the investigation that I've been through, I have had I've had a situation where we started an investigation inside the department, and that was the so-called digital vibes investigation. And we went through and got things concluded, and then we handed over to the SIU. But when the SIU releases the report, then they start making accusation on me specifically. So I've challenged them on this issue, and I pointed out the mistakes that they've made in this thing. Then I asked the question, why did they actually say that I have transgressed a cabinet resolution when they actually know it doesn't exist? Why do they make assumptions that I was involved? And in that process, then as I challenge them, I also then pick up issues, because I've said that there were predetermined findings for them. And I'm asking why. Now, I now hear lots of rumors about interference at the back by some of the members of the executive who would talk to individuals and trying to influence them in a particular direction. There's a case also that's been reported of, one media reported this, of a report that involved not only the state's security but other foreign agents who actually prepared a report about the factions in the ANC advising the leaders of the organizations. Now, that actually makes us very nervous to say, how do you have that kind of interference in the party politics, which is supposed to be just a normal democratic space? I've had a situation where a story is published about my involvement in the murder of the CFO, former CFO of Gauteng, and may her soul rest in peace. And all of a sudden you find that these things, as they are happening, the police at the back have not gone to actually find out who said that this person must be framed. But you hear the stories are being discussed to say, well, Zweli Mkhize may be charged for those things, and they know it's not true. The state security went to challenge the newspaper when they actually exposed the fact that there was an agency report that was talking about the ANC factions. And the court reports are saying, well, this thing might cause too much turmoil because the people are powerful, they're holding high positions. There should be transparency on all of those issues. And my point is that that's not the ANC policy. We're saying that individuals take, liberties to do things, and we need to actually rein those in. And my point is that the ANC is fighting against corruption, and that, everybody needs to subject themselves. But we shouldn't allow whether they are our colleagues or not, we shouldn't allow a situation where they are seen to be putting pressure on the state agencies to act. There are instances where I have received such information, and I have raised that to the National Executive Committee to say.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Was the key is to act on the information and not to keep it to then augment the conspiracy theories, which are always. I mean, conspiracy theories are bound, especially in the run-up to elective conferences. That has always happened. But I would argue that the key is to always take the information to the people who can actually do something about it.
Have you heard about the protection of whistleblowers? Why do you protect them? It's because they actually fear that if anything happens, they would actually be harmed. And therefore, if you get information on that basis and you can see conclusively that in fact it is true, you may not be at liberty to expose that because you will be exposing who has actually informed you of that, and that is not correct. So all we can do is to basically say, let's manage the issues within the party and make sure that people are reined in, and that's the point we're making.
Okay, if you've just joined us, we're trying to get inside the mind of Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who wants to lead the ANC and eventually the country, together with his running mate, and that's Mr. Phumulo Masualle, who wants to run the governing party full-time as the Secretary General based at the Luthuli House headquarters of the ANC. This conversation continues right after this. Welcome back. We're in conversation with Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who aspires to be the ANC's next president, and next to him is his running mate, so to speak, and that's Mr. Phumulo Masualle, who is, of course, gunning for the position of Secretary General of the ANC. Now, to get where you want to go, where the people who have nominated you want to go, and to do the things you were talking about, to solve the problems you have identified, you've got to go past the first hurdle, and that is to be elected in about 3 weeks' time. Now, as things stand, you have 6 provincial executive committees having thrown their weight behind incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa. You have KZN, the 7th, which is firmly behind you, and that's where both of you are getting the most of your support. And then you have 2 other provinces that are yet to hold elective conferences, and by the look of things, or as things stand, it would seem that they too, the majority of their members of branches will throw their weight behind Cyril Ramaphosa. The leagues, the 3 leagues, have done the same. It looks like the odds are stashed against you.
I think your report is correct about what the nomination pattern has been. And we must start with the first issue, and that is democracy in the party is normal, and therefore even if there are minority views, they have to be allowed expression so that the conference can then take a determination as to what the best way forward. And therefore, when you get nominated, you are nominated on the basis of the views of those who nominate you. There are a number of things involved. The threshold you have to make through that, so many people would have been considered, and then the numbers reduced when you get towards the consolidation of those nominations. Then after that, you have to go to the conference. Now, I can just say 2 things about it. Firstly, the nominations don't determine what the conference outcome is going to be, because there's a lot of engagements that get involved. But there are a number of people, a number of members of the ANC who have said that they feel that there would be a pressure on them either to be followed up, investigated on the same issue that I've just been raising, and therefore they would want to take a particular posture, and then that might not be the posture that they will take at the time of the conference. So I think that if it was a drawn conclusion, it would mean that there would be no need for conference. The fact that there's a need for conference and there's a secret ballot, I think we must respect the conference to take its decision. So where I sit, I go on the basis that you don't stand simply because you want to win. You stand because you respect the fact that you have actually been asked to stand in, and allow the branches, the delegates, to make their pronouncement on that basis. And once the conference is done, you have to accept the result that come from that.
But that said, Mr. Masualle, I mean, a conference, is a numbers game, and going into this campaign, a lot depended on many factors, but among those factors, you, for example, bringing the Eastern Cape constituency, which hasn't happened.
Thank you for that. I don't know where you rely on for that information. I can just also add first by saying that we, in terms of process, it's important that we appreciate that conference has to be the ultimate decider. And we've had the exercise now where branch have had their branch general meetings, nominated their delegates, and we are now on course to get to conference. We're engaging with all the provinces. In the Eastern Cape, perhaps, where you're referring to, I don't know if they disclosed how the nominations had gone there, but I'm pretty confident out of confirmations and engagements throughout the regions of the Eastern Cape. We have had very commendable support in spite of some of the expressions, and subsequently I can say that the complexion of the Eastern Cape insofar as coming to the national conference is something that is not the obvious that is thought to be or expressed. I think it's a lot more complicated than we are making of it. For outsiders, it might look very simple, cut and dry.
So you don't think it's true that perhaps you lost the Eastern Cape in May, when your Babalo Matigizelas, your Andile Lungisas and them actually lost the provincial conference, and from then on it was just downhill from there?
Absolutely not. In fact, where I see it, I even have a greater responsibility, not just to them, but to the others as well, so that they find reason in looking at presenting the province at a national level much, much more differently than it is, this sense of continuous state of being divided. It's something that is really catching fire as I speak in the province. As I say, you are going to see a different expression of the Eastern Cape in the national conference.
On today's papers, I don't know if you saw it, ANC Eastern Cape chairperson Oscar Mabuyane is quoted as saying that your support for Dr. Mkhize is meant to divide the province, and that's all that it was about. And then he goes further to say that you are not actively participating in the agenda of people who want to divide the Eastern Cape, but rather you being a quote-unquote victim of those pursuing that agenda.
Should we really entertain that? Because just the articulation itself is just so incorrect, incoherent in the sense that going to a conference, there is an exchange of views, an exchange of names across the board. I think it's a mistaken expression to say that there is an intention to divide the province. Because if you were to look at this differently, there is no intention to divide Gauteng when someone nominates President Cyril. So the whole formulation is problematic. So I don't think it really would merit being a position, so to speak. As I'm saying, I'm talking to them.
What he says, Mr. Mabuyane says he has engaged with you, has he?
Absolutely, yes, we are. We are talking.
Yeah, sharing what
we're talking about exactly the things I've said, how to present the province in the national stage as a much consolidated outfit, so as to impact making better the state of the ANC, but also itself as an agent to ensure transformation in society.
Is there a meeting of minds?
On that principle, absolutely, yes.
Let's come to Gauteng, Dr. Mkhize, if you will. I mean, there could have never been a better reason to include a poll for KZN in particular, which is the province backing you the most, to include Paul Mashatile than to have him bring Gauteng, which, again, as is the case in the Eastern Cape, doesn't seem to be what is transpiring.
Well, first let me say that you are raising the issue of numbers. Can I just confirm to you that I have got support from delegates, regions in all the provinces of the country. I've met with regional leaders, I've met with a number of leaders. A number of them have indicated that they, for particular reasons, feared to show any hostile or any negative nominations against some of the leaders, so they would do the nominations, but then they would not be following that when they come to the conference.
So essentially they are lying low.
Well, in a way they are lying low, but I think people's careers, sometimes they feel that they are threatened, and therefore the only thing that will protect them is a ballot, secret ballot. So I feel very confident about it. Then secondly, let me also say that in this case, I didn't just stand up and say, come and nominate me. I have been approached, and what the provinces have done, they've gone around engaging each other, and that's how they came around with the numbers of people. So if you are elected, you're not at liberty to decide who you want to lead with. And so KZN went out to talk to the other provinces and spoke to Gauteng and spoke to Limpopo, and that's why you see some of the candidates that come from there. Comrade Mabuyane is being disingenuous. Unless he means that when Eastern Cape nominated Mtumseni Ntuli, they wanted Eastern Cape were trying to divide KwaZulu-Natal. If that's what he means, then maybe I'll understand it. But there is no way one province can nominate a whole slate that is only a list of leaders who are only coming from their province. They've got to negotiate. And what I appreciated this time around with the way the nominations have gone is that the structures of the ANC tried to look at what is it that can pull together a large number of provinces so that they can work together, because the ANC is a national body, it's a national organization, so it must find its expression in different parts of the country. Now, you give an example of the Eastern Cape. If I can give you an example of Polokwane, the Eastern Cape had two delegations that believed in one in the different candidate and another in another candidate. But the candidate who won was the one who was supported by those who were actually not led by the leadership of the province. So it does happen that you can have so many people in a province who will vote against the preferred position of their leadership. That does not necessarily mean that if the leadership pronounced in a particular way, the branches will necessarily follow. That's just a guide which helps, but it's not absolute. And so if you read too much into it, you may actually overestimate what you have seen. And I remain very confident with what I've found when I interacted with the different structures.
I'm glad, you mentioned Limpopo, that's where I was going next, because there again, as is the case with Paul Mashatile in Gauteng, Stan Matawata seems to have numbers for himself, for the position of chairperson, but which don't translate into numbers for the rest of you. Are you happy with Paul Mashatile being on the list of people who support, who are on your, let's call it, slate as deputy president, in the same way that you are happy with Phumulo Masualle as for the position of Secretary General?
Well, I'm comfortable with those who have been nominated with, as a matter of principle, in the African National Congress, there's no leader I can't work with. and therefore, if the branches so wished to structure the leadership in a particular way, it's our responsibility to make sure that that leadership works. And so, at the end of the day, those delegates must make a determination as to who they believe must be part of the leadership. In my view, I believe in a united African National Congress. I believe in dismantling the factions. I believe in leaders not leading on the basis of friendship or factionalism, and I will not fail to work with anybody when it comes to the ANC.
Well, I'm keen to know whether you would have had or would have preferred someone else, and I'm also saying this because on the back of that interview that Paul Masualle gave to Business Day last week, where he is quoted as saying that your Digital Vibes saga and Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala saga are both, quote unquote, a dark cloud hanging over the party.
Well, he then issued a statement subsequently saying that he never mentioned anybody's names. He was talking about corruption in general. And so until we have had a discussion with him, I wouldn't know what that situation would be about. But I think you must also understand that as we speak in public and addressing our members and delegates and the public, our delegates are also making up their minds about what they want to engage us on. We have to be accountable for the things that we have to say. I think what is also important is to just make sure that when we deal with these issues, we keep a clear line between who's a candidate and also what you can say on the basis of being the authority in charge of an office which is supposed to act impartially. And so those issues are issues that must be cleared internally.
Well, of course, I mean, both of you, I mean, know this. What gave former President Jacob Zuma the edge in Polokwane was everyone who was in kin on former President Thabo Mbeki to rally behind one candidate. Now, as things stand, you have two other candidates, for example, for the position of president, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and Ms. Lindiwe Sisulu, who are, of course, I mean, as things stand, I mean, they don't stand a chance at all. At what point, Mr. Masualle, do you then say, together with your running mate, we now need to speak to these people? We now need to consolidate.
Again, I would say it's a matter of time between now and conference. But certainly, we have had this desire that we work together. And to that effect, we, though, took the principle that we should not stand in front of the will of the branches. To the extent branches have to exercise their right to nominate, we took a view that let us be guided by those nominations. But the principle held between the leaders was that where the nominations show strength in a particular direction, we will all work to strengthen that. That's a principle we've taken, and perhaps it's something then left to the individual leaders when they have the opportunity to indicate as such for themselves. But we had thought that we don't need to have this multiplicity of candidates vying for the same positions, where we are fairly agreed on the strategic direction and the issues that confront the organization presently. And I think in that respect, the coming few days may just be telling.
It gets tricky though from there, because I mean, those people also come with expectations, they come with demands, which means the people you've been traversing this road with up until now, some of them would have to fall away.
I think you must understand what it means. It basically means that the branches of the ANC were looking elsewhere other than reaffirming the re-election of the existing leadership as it stands. And on that basis, you would understand that they are now looking at other candidates in the process. The nominations process, the engagement processes would obviously reduce the number as we're getting closer to the time. And so there'll be a lot of agreements about who works with who's going to continue. And out of all of that, everyone who stands as a candidate of the National Executive Committee has got expectations to be elected, but they also know that the expectations will be tempered by the votes at the by the delegates at the conference. So there is nothing more special other than to say you make yourself available and then you accept what the delegates ultimately decide at the conference.
Your predecessor, that's assuming that you will indeed be elected to the position of Secretary General of the ANC. But Ace Masualle has been saying this over and over again, that money plays a big part. And the next 3 weeks are going to involve that. In Pietermaritzburg at the weekend, you did talk about at the Oliver Tambo, delivering the Oliver Tambo Memorial Lecture. You did speak about this. And from what Ace Masualle said not too long ago, anyone who doesn't have money or is not going to put money on the table must just forget conference.
It's something that we've got to consciously work against, fight it off, because essentially there are attempts at diluting the content and outlook of the leadership of the ANC through the use of money. It may be money that emanates in quotas within the country and outside of the country. Perhaps the measures recently adopted may help to cap that. That there should be disclosure for anyone who is having any such financial support, where it comes from, etc. Because in the aftermath of the 54th National Conference, where such was for the first time so used, we still have matters outstanding to date to have full disclosure in terms of what happened with the sources of where did those monies come from, to who did they go to. But it is indeed an issue. We have seen it in the processes leading up to some regional conferences and provincial conferences, to a point that people have then devised a strategy to deal with it, to say whoever brandishes money around, where you are unable to resist, take it, but do the right thing. In fact, in one conference I know, that was just the key message. Where you are confronted with money, our people are very poor in many circumstances. Delegates, some of them are not employed. If you come across somebody brandishing 3,000 rand worth of airtime, it's something that is very difficult to say no to. But we would say to our comrades consciously, well, take the money, but don't do what you are asked to do. Go and do the right thing when you get to the ballot. It's the message that we are making across so that you cannot stop those who have hefty pockets brandishing that around.
I would say, I mean, sort of preserve of those who are in charge of state resources per se, because if you listen to some of the horror stories coming out of the last NASREC conference, I mean, there's the issue of the sealed CR17 records, but I mean, allegations contained in books about the other grouping. Which was opposing, having done the same.
Well, I wouldn't know. I've heard that there were the CR17 records. Unfortunately, they are sealed, so we wouldn't be able to say much about them. My point, though, is that some of the temptations of using money arises on people who would like to get elected and get the favors from delegates, and therefore that that they would attempt and try and affect the conference outcomes because of that. But what people are undermining is the real love for the African National Congress that our members, delegates and branches have, and their desire to see the ANC being restored to a proper organization which is able to respond to concerns of the public. You know, when people live in an area which is infested with crime, when people know that you know, there's so much of drug trafficking and the what we now call amapara, where youngsters whose lives have more or less been destroyed by the drugs, and they are not seeing the active involvement of the ANC leadership, then they would want to get a leadership that will be able to focus on those issues. When the problem of unemployment is so high, when townships are decimated and there's no economy at all, those issues are what drives our members to decide on the leadership. And certainly when they approached me, they didn't approach me because of money. They didn't approach me because of you know, wishing to be given money. They approached me because they're saying the African National Congress has got a mission to liberate us. It's our only hope. Get some way of restoring that. And so, money or no money, that desire to you know, reactivate the ANC and renew the ANC and rebuild the ANC is very strong.
A couple of quick ones. We have run out of time. So, listening to what you have said about, you know, how some members or constituencies are behaving, there will be no point then in the course of this campaign over the next 3 weeks where you will say, I'm looking at the numbers, I'm prepared to concede, it's over.
Look, what made me agree to stand is because I accept that we need to ensure that the historic mission of the African National Congress is fulfilled, to make sure that we can actually transform and give hope to the small businesses, to the black businesses who are feeling marginalized, to bring hope to those who have no hope of reactivating their lives because you know, there's no bank that can, you know, support them because the banks are not supporting the very poor. And all of those issues are what determined that one should stand. And until the branches and the delegates have come to a conclusion, I would know what their decision would be.
And that is not based on a glimmer of hope that perhaps is presented by the fact that there's still a parliamentary inquiry into the Phala Phala saga, which may mean that the person you are challenging may have challenges. I was approached, when I was approached, it had nothing to do with Phala Phala. It had something to do with bringing about a change. Because of my history of having been involved in governance and where I've worked with business and created partnerships and ensured we encourage investment, where I've worked to promote, you know, good governance, and was even rated as amongst the top premier during my term because of the combination of working with communities and fighting corruption and giving good governance and building business confidence. That is what brought me into this discussion. There was never a discussion about the Phala Phala, and there was no discussion about, you know, the issue is how do we make the ANC more effective in delivering on the promise of a better life for all? And I've been asked to focus on that, and that's all I will focus on. And the issues that relate to, you know, the investigation in Parliament were not part of this whole discussion, and I don't even think, to me, it is relevant. What is relevant is that there is a huge desire to change the leadership. And for example, if you were to ask me the question, I would say, people are saying, why should we vote for the African National Congress? And I say, the ANC has got its mission to deliver a better life, and it's got good policies, so it must be voted in. But the ANC needs leaders that are focusing on implementation, and that's what I want to contribute. You're saying those who are being offered money, take it, but do the right thing. You don't think that once a province or structure votes, then the mandate of the province or structure is what should carry at conference, meaning even those who may have preferred a different candidate, must vote to or go with the majority decision.
No, it's not like that. Actually, that understanding is a distortion of how processes to conference are. Yes, that platform creates a sense of where do you converge as the province on such matters, but it's practice that going to the national conference, you exchange with the other delegates at conference. Remember, the conference is not the conference of provinces, it's a conference of delegates. So that exchange will obviously yield a different point of convergence. That's how it is. I think I could say we just engage now in talks about talks. The real talks, that is the business of conference, will begin in earnest on the 16th of December when credentials are adopted. Then you have conference. And it's at that point everything will be a lot more clearer than we have things now.
Can I just say one?
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Dr. Mkhize. That's where we're going to leave it for tonight, but more on part 2 of this conversation tomorrow night. Until then, stay safe.